We're back live.
All right, so we are ready to begin the meeting. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange. I'm Leslie Johnstone, new chair for the board, and with that quick introduction, I will ask Mr. Gilbert to take roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chairman.
I'll be chair.
Very well, Chair. Ms. Kerr.
Here.
Ms. Lewis. Dr. Jameson.
Here.
Dr. Ford.
Here.
That's everybody.
All right, so with 4 members, we have a quorum.
We do.
And just for information, we have 4 members present, and that is our quorum. And councils advise us that that would also be the requirement for any action taken.
That is correct.
All right. Any announcements, Mr. Gilbert?
None.
Okay. We'll move into public comment. Do we have any public comment in Henderson? Ms. Kerr, any public comment in Carson?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have a couple of ex officio members, maybe even a new one. Can you introduce the ex officios that are present, please, in Carson?
All right. I think that it might be easier if they introduce themselves and give us just a brief statement. We have James R. Wells and Richard Whitley. So welcome, gentlemen. And if you could just briefly tell us your the roles you'll be doing, and that'd be very good. Thank you.
Hi, this is Richard Whitley, and I serve as the Interim Director for the Department of Health and Human Services.
My name is Jim Wells. I serve as the Interim Director of the Department of Administration.
Thank you. Appreciate your help, gentlemen. All right. No other public comment. We will move on to item number 3, which is approval of the minutes from the February 12th meeting. Any board members have any comments or corrections? Motion to approve.
This is Dr. Ford. I move to approve the minutes.
Dr. Jameson, second. Thank you. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is number 4, the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you. As I promised last time we met, and even as we continue to await the final numbers from the recent open enrollment, staff has already turned its attention to and is moving forward on a number of projects that will be critical to our future and bring closure to the past. We're working with CMS and SSHIX to develop a sustainability plan which fairly recognizes the contributions of both the exchange and our federal partners and ensures our continued success. We're actively monitoring both state and federal legislation to identify areas of concern and protect the interests of the exchange. We're developing our plan management and certification capabilities and are doing everything that's necessary to be prepared to do what's needed for the upcoming plan year. We're reviewing the information which appears on our website, removing that which is obsolete, and there's quite a bit of that, with the goal of updating the look as well as the content ultimately. We're forging ahead on our Consumer Assistance Center and building a training process which will assure we're not just staffed but ready to go when the changeover arrives, either April 1st or April 16th as the case may be. We're engaging with our brokers and agents and messaging the upcoming special enrollment and strengthening our relationship with those critical to our future success. We're assessing the responses to our recent Navigator RFA, and we've begun negotiating with our anticipated marketing firm, as Tyler will speak to. And we are, of course, pushing through the Xerox reconciliation, maintaining an open dialogue with the Division of Insurance and addressing the concerns of both carriers and consumers as we move forward. In short, we're pretty busy, and it doesn't look as though that's going to change anytime soon. You'll hear a lot about the specifics of our activities over the course of the meeting, and I will share with you I'm very pleased with respect to the work that's being handled I would say fairly small staff, and their ability to juggle a lot of things simultaneously. Someone wise once said that success isn't about winning a marathon, but by the ability to complete a series of short races one after another. And my message to you today is that's exactly what we're doing at this point in our existence. We're being persistent, we're staying on course, we're working hard and coming together as a team, and we all understand that we still have to bring closure to 2014 and its problems, but everything indicates, I think, that we're clearly on the right path. And that would be the sum and substance of my remarks.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Mr. Gilbert? I do have one. I don't think it's spoken to on any other agenda item. The sustainability plan that you're working with CMS and SSHIX, is there a timeline about when you might be able to come back to the board about that? Or?
Bruce Gilbert for the record, and the answer is I believe so. As you know, we've received indications that starting with the 2017 plan year, there will be a fee of some sort, which the federal partners of ours will be anticipating that we will pay for access to their technology and call center. We have meetings scheduled, tentatively scheduled next month, to go to Washington to open the process of discussing the matter with them. I think once we get back from there, we'll have a better understanding of sort of where we are and how things will come together.
So for the time being, we don't know of any fee for plan year 2016?
There will be no plan year 2016 fee.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 5, which is open enrollment update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tyler Klimas for the record. I get the fun stuff, so I will go over open enrollment, the closeout, and then the special enrollment period that we start on Sunday. My last report was just a few days before the final weekend, the weekend of February 15th. So I'll report on that final weekend. It was a great weekend. Saw a lot of traffic between the two stores, the one in Reno, the one in Las Vegas, and then the Get Healthy, Get Covered event at the Cox Pavilion. We saw over 700 people, and that's on the final day. So that was on Sunday. The entire weekend was busy throughout both enrollment stores. Again, only a small, very small percentage, as I'll speak to here in a second, of the enrollees, but you know, when you put it in the context of those are 700 people who felt they needed to sit down and have one-on-one assistance, one-on-one conversations, beyond all the agents and brokers. It's a big deal, and I think we can all be proud of that number and proud of the support we were able to give consumers throughout the last weekend. So CMS released its numbers on February 18th, announcing over 72,000 Nevadans had selected a plan through open enrollment. We received the report on Tuesday morning of this week that in the extra week that they opened up anybody who had started an application but didn't get to finish, they gave them a grace period of an extra week. They gave us another 1,000. So we were at about just over 73,000 for open enrollment, which is a great number. I think one of the things they included in the report was during the last week of open enrollment, out of the states that utilize healthcare.gov, Nevada had the largest percent increase in plan selections. And that's out of 37 states. So we had 21%, which means that final week, we did our by the numbers spot, the spot created just for the Young Invincibles. We did our media blitz. We put extra funds into the marketing and into the broadcast, into the mass media. And so I think that all had something to do with that 21%, which is a big number. It's the most out of all the states that utilize healthcare.gov. So that's it with at least the open enrollment closeout. So I'll move on to the special enrollment period, the tax season special enrollment period. Press release went out Tuesday morning to the media, the agents and brokers, the sisters, all of our partners, providing information about this extra sign-up period. It's from March 15th to April 30th. It is not open to everyone. there are some limitations here, and a few things that you need to attest to be able to qualify for this. And really what this open enrollment or the special enrollment period does is if you're now getting around to filling out your taxes, which many people are and won't until April 15th or close to it, and you realize, well, I didn't have coverage in 2014 and now I need to pay the fee, the shared responsibility payment. I didn't know I had to do this, but I see it now. And I want to avoid this or avoid any future or additional fees for next year. This is what this period is there for. It's for that segment of the population that is just now seeing this, just now understanding this. This gives them that extra period to sign up to avoid anything for next year, or at least any additional fees for next year. Because it's not available to everyone, our media had to be a little more targeted. We started with a press release. We'll certainly have more if we need to announce any changes or to announce, hey, there's 1 week left, something along those lines. PR outreach and interviews. We did specific print ads in both English and Spanish that we will target in different markets. We did specific call center scripts in English and in Spanish for people who call with questions. We have a dedicated webpage on NevadaHealthLink.com. It's /special enrollment. That goes through all the information that you need, as well as an information sheet, much like we did the open enrollment packet before we started this year, something new that we did. We did another one-sheeter, and the one-sheeter, describes what the special enrollment period is, who qualifies, and most importantly, how you can get help. Of course, our enrollment stores are closed now, so our zip code search tool is very important. Our navigator organizations are very important, and then of course the agents and brokers are equally as important. This information sheet was sent to the media, to all of our state partners, all of the constituent services offices that we work with, congressional staff, statewide staff, sent this to LCB, so that's what I have on that. We will report, and I will certainly report in the March and April board meeting how the special enrollment period is going. Any kind of numbers will again have to come from the federal government, so we will look out for those and pass those along when we receive them. I'm gonna come back to one more section in my report, but before I do that, I'm gonna have Steph, who I believe is in Carson City from KPS3, deliver the final marketing and outreach report for open enrollment.
Good afternoon, Stephanie Cruz with KPS3. I believe you have the reports in your packet, and I'd like to just walk through that with you at this time. Our agenda, we're going to cover the media campaign, the outreach campaign, the enrollment stores, and then some key insights that we're recommending that we consider going forward. So the first full page in your packet, the media campaign highlights. We were very pleased with the number of impressions that we delivered. The total delivered was 241 million impressions. Our goal was 199. We reached our targeted individuals 38.2 times through TV and radio, where it was a very robust TV and radio campaign. And again, our goal was 30.3. We over-delivered the number of impressions in each of our media channels. And something KPS3 is very proud of is the added value that we negotiated and delivered. Over $712,000 in added value, bonus spots, editorial content, panels that we were able to negotiate, other promotions. So we did over-delivered in terms of $712,000 over and above your $3.2 million media budget. Moving on to the next page. Media campaign achievements. As Tyler mentioned, we ramped up definitely in the key times of every month around the 15th. And in the final month, we really pushed it hard. And I think that helped drive a lot of people to the website to enroll and also to the events and to the stores. We had our research that indicated that young invincibles, like many human beings, wait until the last minute to enroll.
And they did, and we saw that happening a lot of the time where there was a lot of last-minute rush to enroll. We developed and executed creative approaches based on what our target audiences told us in our initial research. We ran, I think you remember, the By the Numbers spot, the animated video that we did is specifically targeting Young Invincibles, and that was pushed very heavily in the last month. The Yes campaign, which was our major campaign, was memorable, and the frequency was very high. In fact, we had people coming into the stores and telling us how many times they had seen it. We also executed a digital advertising placement campaign that target our audiences not only based upon demographics, but upon research that we received from our media partner that showed their preferences so that we could really target them. We really pursued them in places that really resonated with their values and their preferences. We continually adjusted our messaging and tactics to achieve the best value and success through our digital media, driving 20,000 plus Nevadans to the pre-screener tool. That's the number of clicks. We were able to install a tracking system this year on the website to be able to see how many people we actually drove to the pre-screener tool. We implemented social media through Facebook and Twitter. We really were able to leverage media partnerships to really do the last push for the enrollment stores and the enrollment events at the end of the enrollment period. And we held, I think, a lot of consistency and frequency in trying to reach those who needed to re-enroll. So they were touched multiple times in terms of reminding them that they needed to re-enroll because of the change in the system. Moving on to outreach campaign, we held 288 events and had distribution of materials, over 521,000 touch points. Our goal was 500,000. We had 429,000 people in attendance at those events that we exposed to the brand. Our favorite thing to do was actually have a one-on-one conversation with them, however, because we wanted to point them to a store. We wanted to point them to in-person assistance. We distributed over 91,000 pieces of literature, and we were very pleased at our 17 cents per touch final cost in our outreach campaign. Some more about the outreach campaign on page 6. We really diversified our outreach activities this year. We just didn't cut and paste from last year's plan. We included more college athletics, athletic club tabling, which was very successful in reaching the Young Invincibles, mall tabling, and then new partnerships such as NAACP and the LGBT communities. We were really able to reach different audiences and more audiences than we did last year. And we had something that we're very proud of. We were able to work through the HR departments of several large casino and gaming corporations to have them distribute our materials to their part-time employees who were unbenefited. You can see that I'm sure you've seen them, and you will probably continue to see the numbers of hundreds of thousands of pieces of printed materials that we used to touch and inform our target audience. And most importantly, were those in-person conversations. We found that because of the anxiety over the technical difficulties from last year, one of the roles we played in our outreach was to really ease their anxiety and reassure them that this year it was going to be a lot easier when they tried to re-enroll or when they tried to enroll this year. So that was a very important in-person task that we were able to do with our outreach. Moving on to the next page, the enrollment stores and events. We served almost 6,000 Nevadans through our enrollment stores and events. And as you can see, we had actual enrollments over 2,000 and over 1,500 Medicaid enrollments. It was a very successful partnership with the 3 Navigator organizations, 100 plus agents and brokers, the Medicaid staff, and the media. And it really took a village to do these stores. And our Navigator partners and our broker partners were rock stars. They really made sure that these events and these stores were successful. Moving on to page 8, as you remember, this idea came about as a concept that Connecticut had done their first year, and we thought this sounded like a great idea, especially since we knew that people wanted in-person assistance. It was staffed by Ramirez Group, CARE, Nevada Primary Care Association, agents and brokers, KPS 3 staffers, Medicaid leadership, and staffers. So again, we had a great diverse group of people that were really helping uninsured Nevadans. Promoted it through media partnerships, press releases, ads on TV and radio, billboards, which I think you've probably seen in Southern Nevada, those fun little sign twirlers that stand out on the street and try to get your attention to go to the stores. So, I mean, we really, we did what we could to try to drive people to those stores. The one in Boulevard Mall obviously had mall foot traffic as well. It gave the Nevadans an opportunity to get their answers to questions that they had, and again, ease anxiety. They were open 7 days a week, 9 to 11 hours per day, and more near the 15th of each month. Again, our partnerships that really helped staff and made these successful were outstanding. Again, it would not have been possible without this team. Moving on to page 9, a little bit about the website. I think our two biggest additions and our two successes, the direct link to the pre-screener tool was very important. And as you could see from the number of click-throughs, it really helped people get to where they needed to go to almost immediately to start the process. And then the function that allowed people to search for in-person assistance was also very important, whether it was for a navigator organization or a participating broker or for a store. To be able to lead people to get some in-person help was a very important function of this year's website. Moving on to page 10, these are the website metrics as of the 4th. And if you look at the numbers, the metrics since launch, the visits, unique visits, and page views went up sky high compared to where they were through January 12th. It really showed the impact of those last months and weeks of promotion and efforts on everybody's part to get people to pay attention that it's time to enroll. So you can see that they really increased exponentially. Again, the important visitor activity, clicks through the pre-screener tool, 155,000 clicks to the pre-screener tool. Managed plans, those are the 2014 plan that we made it easier for people to find their 2014 plan information and manage that online. 47,000 clicks to healthcare.gov, and then 41,000 plus clicks to Access Nevada Checkup. So again, we were able to guide people to the source of coverage that they needed. Massive activity increase in the website the last month of open enrollment. It just went through the roof, and I guess that was really due to a lot of the publicity and a lot of the promotion and the advertising and our heavy focus on digital advertising. Awareness was and is still high, as evidenced by Nevadans who are still visiting the online storefront. We're still getting about 1,500 visitors a day to the website. Still kind of thinking maybe that they could enroll or needing information or being able to do some other function. So we're still getting pretty good visits to the website. So last page, page 11, some key insights that I would recommend that we continue to keep in mind as you move forward. Research really helped us fuel a successful campaign. The awareness survey that we did at the end of last enrollment period really gave us an idea of where we were starting this year. The great secondary research we received of national data, and then our focus groups really helped us determine what is the best way to message and reach the people that we needed to reach. Our media expertise garnered 20% additional and added value. That's $700,000 in free media. I'd highly recommend that, given next year's budget, that this would be an important strategy for you to continue. Outreach focused not only in reaching as many people, but on the quality of those interactions. Again, one-on-one conversations we loved. It was just very integrated approach to making sure that people had what they needed and we could direct them to an assister or a navigator. Learning the success of the Connecticut Exchange in conjunction with our own success, the enrollment stores were born and they succeeded. Everybody participated in making this a very successful strategy, and I think it's something very definitely to look at again next year. We helped build the online tools that Nevada needed for a positive enrollment experience. I would strongly recommend, again, continuing the zip code lookup feature. The pre-screener tool worked very, very well, and it was a very good tool for people to get into the process. And then the digital campaign, even though it's hard to wrap your brain around, it really helped drive people to the website because that's where we want them to go. So a digital component of your advertising campaign is very, very, very helpful. And then I think probably what sums it up is this year we had a very, very strong focus on the customer experience, whether it was via the website or enrollment events or outreach events or the enrollment stores. Customer service was paramount. And I think that really, the dignity and respect that we can impart in our activities, I think is very important and would recommend that we continue that kind of philosophy. And in closing, I would just like to say thank you very much on behalf of everyone at KPS3 for the honor of serving the Health Insurance Exchange for the last 2 years and the privilege of being able to help uninsured Nevadans. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Are there any questions on that report? Members?
Dr. Jameson?
I just wanted to thank them for this outstanding work you have done for 2 years. Just exemplary. The plan that you laid out and the strategies, the expertise, buying expertise, the stores, and the impressive sprint at the finish line where we got the highest increase in enrollment percentage out of all 37 states. Just bravo. Thank you for your outstanding work.
Thank you very much.
And this is Leslie Johnstone. I would echo all of that. I think it was very, very nice to see that we didn't have any hangover from the first year, and everything in the second year was just so positive. The media coverage that I saw was always very positive, and I love the ads that you crafted, and the research that you put behind it really tells the story and the results that we got. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a privilege.
Great. I'll move on then. Just the last section. Before I do, I would also echo both of yours as the staff member who interacted with KPS3 no less than 10 times a day for the last 3.5 months. I think there's a lot of things that we should be proud of coming out of this open enrollment period. So before I end mine, and I realize that I've taken up quite a bit of time, just wanted to give you an update on the marketing RFP. We had 4 submissions. The RFP review committee selected Pinna Powers as the top scoring agency, and contract negotiations have been entered in with Pinna Powers. We have a target of the May Board of Examiners meeting for final approval of the contract, and of course the details will come before the board as well, and I'll have more information on that at the April board meeting. Just wanted to give you a quick update. With that, and with no other questions.
Board members have questions?
I do actually. This is Dr. Ford for the record. Regarding the special enrollment,
Yes.
and I realize you have to do the math. Do we know how many people could be eligible for the special enrollment?
The answer is no. So we don't have a good target at all. I mean, with what you have to attest to that information, as far as, we certainly know the uninsured amount, but you'd have to know the uninsured amount as well as who is going to have to pay the fee for this year. And then again, with the third bullet point is you have to attest that you didn't know that there was a fee for not having coverage in 2014. So it would be very hard to quantify that number.
Thank you. Any other questions? Dr. Jameson?
Is this pretty much across the board with all the other exchanges offering this special enrollment?
The answer is yes. So with the 37 states that utilize healthcare.gov, we're one of those 37. The period is the same, March 15th to April 30th. However, nationwide, the other exchanges, everybody's got some variation. Not everybody, but most of them have some variation of this tax season special enrollment period.
Yeah, Bruce Gilbert for the record. A number of other states that have state-based platforms like California are also doing this. So you're seeing it basically nationally.
I have a question on the 72,000 or 73,000. Do you know when CMS might put out, or do we even get it from CMS, the number of individuals that paid so that we could compare it to last year's staff?
Yeah, this is Bruce Gilbert for the record. We have had some reports coming in from our carriers basically monthly. It's information that they provide to CMS that hopefully guides us in understanding how many have paid versus how many have enrolled. However, in discussions with some of our carrier partners, we have learned that they may be as much as 2 months in arrears when it comes to the information that's contained in those reports. And so it's very difficult for us to provide a good number at this point in time. I mean, to be frank, it could take until May or even June by the time everybody catches up. You know, we know it's north of 50,000. How far north of 50,000? We're not really sure, and we won't be for a couple of months.
Yes, Dr. Jameson.
Dr. Jameson, do you use the word select plan and enroll plan to say interchangeably, or is there a difference between the two?
Bruce Gilbert for the record, and the answer is...
Because we need to discuss the numbers.
Right, well, the government reports, the federal government reports based on plan selections, which means that somebody went into the system, they went through the application process and put in all of their personal information, and then took their shopping cart and went in and said, this is the plan that I want, and I understand what the premium is going to be, and brought that transaction basically to a close. They have no way of capturing how many of those people actually make payment. And so when we talk about plan selection, it's literally people, excuse me, taking action to say, I'm coming in, I've told you who I am, this is the plan that I want. When it comes to enrollment, I guess there's a question about whether it's effectuated enrollment, which is the number of people who actually pay for the coverage, or just enrollment overall, which is generally used synonymously with the prior term. Does that make sense? Plan selection and enrollment are sort of the same thing, but effectuated enrollment.
So it's effectuated is the term that's once the payment's made and it's effectuated. So
right, but there's no way for them to track it, so they don't put those two things together.
Right. Because when I put something in the shopping cart, it doesn't mean I've bought it.
That's exactly right. Because you have time to make payment. You don't have to make it at the same time that you go through the shopping process. So that would be the difference.
Okay. I wonder if when you get past all of these special enrollments, if you don't have it planned already, you kind of do a debrief about what a lot of things went well, but also think about maybe things that didn't go well or weren't worth the effort, that kind of thing, and sometime in the summer, bring forward those ideas and your thoughts for the next cycle.
Right. Bruce Gilbert for the record. Actually, we've sort of already started to walk down that path. You know, we're starting to get a little bit of at least demographic information from our federal partners, which will allow us to better understand who we were ultimately able to reach in terms of age groupings and other things. And we're going to look for areas where we can see improved results next time out. I don't think there's any question, but that overall our strategy was sound. You know, we reached out and we were able to get 73,000 people or more to take an action. So that much was sound. Now the question is, okay, who did we not reach? And that's going to be the more difficult question. We've already started to take a look. The information's starting to trickle in, and we'll have those conversations over the summer, as you suggest.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is legislative update and possible board action and or other action concerning positions or recommendations on pending legislation. Just as a reminder to the board, I know Dr. Jameson wasn't with us in the 2015 session. The board can take position on bills. It doesn't have to take position on bills, but it helps Mr. Gilbert as he represents us in any committee or legislative hearings. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you so much. With respect to this agenda item, there are 2 bills and 1 bill draft request that have been included in the packet. The first bill is AB 86, which was filed on behalf of the governor's office, and it directly affects the board in terms of its constitution and makeup and a couple of other things. The first section of the bill resolves what I think is pretty much just a statutory redundancy. You know, the term state-based doesn't appear anywhere in the Affordable Care Act. The term used in the actual statute is an exchange established by a state. And after some discussions with our federal partners and with the governor's office and others, and with Mr. Belcourt, we've determined that the deletion of the term state-based really doesn't do anything other than housekeeping, because there's no legal status that goes with being state-based. And so that's section 1. Section 2 of the bill expands our membership and allows insurance industry representation. You know, we've always prided ourselves on being transparent and inclusive, and greater industry-specific knowledge should generally be a welcome addition, so I can understand why that was included. Section 3 of the bill happily allows the members of the Exchange Board to receive the same standard compensation for service as members of other boards in Nevada. And the monies for this, frankly, have already been built into our budget and can be accommodated with that issue. And then finally, with respect to Section 4, it reduces the minimum number of meetings of the board to 1 year, but that's a minimum number. It doesn't say you can only meet once. And it establishes only a floor, not a ceiling, and obviously it won't have any impact on the board meeting on such a schedule as it thinks necessary. It may be, would you prefer that I stop between each of these?
I think that'd be appropriate on this one.
Very good.
And the proposed amendment?
Oh, there are 2 proposed amendments which have been offered. The first amendment, assuming that the prohibition against a health insurer representative passes, clarifies that the representative of a health insurer fits into one of the stakeholder categories. There are 5 specific categories that are set out in the legislation, and it would simply make sure that that particular individual or that type of individual will fit into one of the stakeholder categories, specific stakeholder categories. And the reason for that is actually the Second Amendment, which provides for a balance of the stakeholder interests by limiting the interest group or the people within any particular category to no more than 2 members of the board.
And this is an assembly bill. Is it still in committee, or where is it at in the process?
It was heard by the committee twice, and it went into due pass, I believe.
It was amended to pass, so the next action will be on the floor. It's not been scheduled yet.
Okay, thank you. Board have any questions?
I have some questions, Leslie.
Yes, Ms. Kerr.
Have we had legal review done specifically to determine whether these bills are considered to be consistent with federal law? Because we certainly wouldn't want, if there was an inconsistency, I think that it would be a good idea to so inform the legislators. So it would be, I'd be interested to know whether or not that very specific legal review has been done. That's the first question. I have a bunch of questions, but that's one.
Bruce Gilbert for the record. In fact, the very first sort of parsing that we do as we review these bills is try and determine whether, if or as there is any inconsistency with respect to the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. If it does appear that there is a potential for that, generally I will speak with Mr. Belcourt or others to bring them up to speed and to determine whether we believe there to be an issue that remains. With respect specifically to AB 86, there is no conflict with respect to any section of the Affordable Care Act. Now that is not true with some of the other bills that we may discuss today, but with regard to AB 86 itself, there is no conflict.
Okay, so is adding a representative of the insurers to the board consistent with what other states have done? And have we determined or looked at, or maybe gave them a call and asked, whether or not there's a positive, negative, or neutral impact on the consumers in the states where this was done, if it's been done? So I know that's kind of a long-winded question, but I'd be interested to know the answer.
Thank you. Bruce Gilbert for the record. In fact, we have spoken with other states and we've looked at the makeups of their boards. And as you might expect, it varies significantly from one jurisdiction to the next. Some states, such as Kentucky, allow it. Other states do not. Historically, what we have seen in terms of the exchanges, though, dealing with results to consumers, is in those states where there has been significant industry representation and engagement, and I'm talking specifically about the agent and broker and carrier communities, you've seen much more successful enrollment efforts. For example, Kentucky, and that's the first one that I would pick on, determined very early on that they wanted to work very closely with the agent and broker community, and theirs was pretty much a success from the get-go. That's true also in Connecticut as well. There are probably a lot of different states that do a lot of different things. There's no prevailing determination. Yes, industry representation is appropriate or inappropriate as far as carriers and or brokers and agents, but there are states which permit it, and generally speaking, the effect to that you see is greater engagement.
Has it been greater costs to the consumer? Do you know that one? Engagement is good because getting people on, getting people to enroll is great. Has it resulted in greater consumer costs in those states?
For the record, Bruce Gilbert, I'm not prepared to weigh in on that particularly. I'm trying to determine how the makeup of the board would have an impact on the premium costs that are determined generally by the carriers along with the division of insurance in any particular state. So I'm not sure how there would be a cost impact, but I'm not saying there's not. And it may just be something that I need to work through. But I'm more than happy to try and find out the answer to that question and report back to you.
Thank you. When you were going through the AB 86, you briefly stated that there's no legal status of making the amendment of taking out state-based in Section 1. Could you elaborate upon that a little bit?
Yes, thank you. Bruce Gilbert for the record. Congress defined the term exchange with a capital E 3 times as an exchange, quote, established by the state, end quote. Section 1311B1 of the Affordable Care Act directs each state to establish an American health benefit exchange, which is referred to in the title as a capital E exchange. And subsection D1 of the same section reiterates that an exchange shall be a governmental entity, such as the board, or a nonprofit entity that is established by a state. Section 1563, which is the definition section, says it again, which is the term exchange means an American health benefit exchange established under Section 1311. The reason that that's important is that if you take a look at our enabling statute, NRS 695 I-200, what it says is the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange is hereby established. So you have an action by a state establishing an exchange. We did not request that CMS establish an exchange, and the federally facilitated marketplace has never operated in the state of Nevada. There has been essentially unanimous agreement, both with respect to the Attorney General's office and with respect to exchange staff and with respect to CMS and SSHIX, that the language of the statute, of our state statute, when taken along with the definitions as set forth in the federal law, pretty well demonstrates that the state has established an exchange as required by 1311, notwithstanding having labeled ourselves as state-based or not state-based. The position that we have taken is that it's very clear that Nevada operates an exchange established by the state, which is consistent with the language of the federal statute. And so because state-based doesn't appear in the federal statute, it's more of a housekeeping activity than it is anything else, if that makes sense.
I guess my worry is, looking forward, what would happen with the King v. Burrell case. And I think it might be helpful to emphasize that this change at best gives Nevada options, but that and to emphasize that Nevada's current status is a state-based exchange. And this amendment doesn't have any effect on Nevada's status as a state-based exchange. Do you think that might be helpful to emphasize during when this bill goes to the floor, when it goes to the floor? I don't know if there's an if in that.
Yeah, Bruce Gilbert for the record. I would certainly think that that emphasis is appropriate. I would also note that if the board chose, we could offer an amendment to the bill to basically strike Section 1 if the bill found it to be problematic and request that it move forward that way.
I'm not sure. I haven't done the specific analysis of what striking that particular section would do to the entirety of the bill as proposed amended. So I think that maybe it would be helpful to the board if there is that type of, if we were to do that kind of proposal, that we be given more than a few minutes to determine the effect of that type of proposal. But in any case, I think it would be helpful to emphasize Nevada's current status, if that happens before we've had a chance to make any recommendations.
Mr. Belcourt, have anything to offer?
Mr. Belcourt, would you like to weigh in, sir?
Thank you, Chair. Dennis Belcourt, Deputy Attorney General. On that particular bill, it does take out the word state-based out of subsection 1A of 695I.210, but it doesn't appear to amend subsection 1E, which says unless the federal act is repealed or is held to be unconstitutional or otherwise invalid or unlawful, the exchange shall perform all duties that are required of the exchange to implement the requirements of the federal act. So I would read that staying in as continuing this exchange as a state, an exchange established by a state pursuant to the Affordable Care Act. So I'm not sure that I wasn't present for the testimony on why the words state-based were being removed, but they don't seem to have a material effect on this exchange. But I, of course, stand to be corrected by on that one, but it doesn't appear to me to make that any change with respect to what kind of exchange this is.
Two more things. Sorry to be taking up so much time on this. One, there's, I think, 72,000 people counting on us to get this right. So I think anything that we could do to further that would be helpful. Second, and it may be a stupid question, is there a recommendation from staff regarding our possible action? Thanks.
This is Bruce Gilbert for the record. I've had the opportunity to discuss with the governor's office their intent with respect to this bill. And I would share with you, I believe it to be a friendly bill to the exchange. Obviously, it emphasizes and reemphasizes the fact that we are an important institution and agency in the eyes of the administration. And I am very pleased to be able to say that I have sat at a table in a legislative session and had the governor's chief of staff sit next to me and basically speak about the importance of the exchange and the intent of the administration that there be no change with respect to our status. And given that, given the information that's been provided to us and given our interaction with respect to the governor's office, I would be, and I am, frankly, more than comfortable in supporting the bill, but of course that is up to the board.
Dr. Jameson.
Lawrence Jameson, Chairwoman Johnstone, as you pointed out, I wasn't in the early stages of this board, but I vaguely remember controversial things in the news. But I remember when they talked about health insurers having representation on the board, and it wasn't favorably spoke of. So as you pointed out now, Ms. Kerr pointed out some things, such as would it affect the insurance rate? Could it raise the cost? And as you say, when you think it through, you're not sure how that could happen because really the insurance rates are going to be set by the companies and the commissioner and everything. So how a board member. So I kind of thinking it out with my limited knowledge and all these things, don't know how it would actually affect the rates, which would be the critical thing for me. But I do feel, and I would like to further understand what the issues were early on, why they weren't allowed in the first place. Before I, chime in on this one. But I also just feel, right or wrong, I think the health insurer on the board could be just not necessarily really be a problem, but might have a perception of conflict of interest, which often in many people's minds is just weighs as strongly as when there really is a problem. And so what were the reasons in the past there was hesitation? And I am concerned about a perception because we know these companies, they have their private ones, plans they offer in private outside the exchange. We know they offer their plans in the exchange. So they're already dealing with, both sides. And so some people might think if one of these representatives is on the board, that even though there really isn't a connection, as we're trying to see if there is, that there could be a perceived conflict of interest. But what were the reasons in the past?
This is Leslie Johnstone. Would just, point out that we didn't come together until after the statute was in place, and so we weren't party to the bill going forward as it currently looks, or the bill that established the exchange. I think there was an attempt to do something like this in the 2013 session, but the board didn't take a position on the bill, and it went through its own political process and didn't come out the other end for whatever reasons. Not being there, it's hard to know what the reasons are.
So nobody really recalls what those reasons were. Okay.
And for the record, your comments with respect to the perception of a potential conflict of interest, I think obviously are sound. What I would point out, and the only thing that occurs to me is having had the opportunity to work with the board and be part of our deliberations and do the things that we do, the actual amount of influence that a particular board member would be able to wield to benefit themselves or others is really pretty small, to be frank with you. And more important than that, from my perspective, is I think that especially having had the opportunity to work with the agent and broker and carrier community more closely than we have previously, I think that we find that they are a source of knowledge that would be helpful to the board. I'm not saying that we should have 7 necessarily members of that community sit on the board, but I do think that they're a shareholder in what we do, and that their knowledge and insight is valuable to the board. And it was on that basis that I did not have an issue with respect to what was proposed.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I will chime in on this one. I think my biggest concern is whether or not we inadvertently step on the status of us as an exchange established by the state. I'm with Vice Chair Kerr on this. Just don't want to have this be an inadvertent problem if the court case goes against exchanges that were not established by the state. So maybe another review for the board's comfort would help with our deliberation on it. As far as the membership of the board, I have my personal opinion as a member of the board. I don't think it seems kind of self-serving to me to have the board talk about who its membership should be. This is a public board and the public should decide. So that's my opinion on the two different things.
When does this...
With that,
I'm sorry.
Ms. Chair, Ms. Kerr.
I'm so sorry to cut in. When does this go to vote? Do we have any idea and how much how much notice would we have if it went up?
No, this is Bruce Gilbert for the record. It has not been scheduled to this point in time. So I think that we do have the opportunity to seek clarification or to make a determination ultimately as to where the board, if it wishes to weigh in, comes in on this. So I do believe that we have some time.
And this is Leslie Johnstone. It's not critical. I don't think the board takes an action today. If the additional review that we've talked about in terms of the exchange being established by the board is looked at, if staff could get back to us on that. If it is critical that we have a discussion about it before the next board meeting, we could call a special board meeting via the telephone if we wanted to consider it, or if it the timing works out as such that's appropriate, we could talk about it again at the April board meeting. There's going to be a date for bills to get out of the House of Origination, which I'm not going to remember when that is.
Except that this was due pass, right? No.
Dr. Jameson?
Florence Jameson, I also feel very strongly about the requirement of the exchange be state-based. I'm very disturbed that that would be removed. And so even though in general I agree with her that we need more information overall before making a possible action, I also know that the legislatures can work very slow and then all of a sudden fast and furious and put your bill up and start working on it. And I would feel really devastated if this got passed as is with changing the state-based part. Based on that, I would like our chairwoman to consider that we voice our opinion that if this bill was to go forward as is with state-based, that one particular portion, we don't agree with it, or as you say, amend.
So we could hear that as a motion and see if there's a second.
Okay, I would like to motion that on Bill AB 86, that the portion referring to the bill removing that the exchange be state-based, that we are not supportive of that part of the bill.
Is there a second?
Can we maybe say that we are not supportive of that part of the amendment, and or that that we would support our executive director informing the legislature about our about that. Let me back up. Just say that we don't support that amendment versus that part, because the part could mean more than one thing.
Bruce Gilbert, for the record, what I would ask the board consider is this. Now that you have given me a sense of your viewpoint toward AB 86, and particularly the first section, which deals with state-based, what I would ask is that you provide me the opportunity to go to the governor's office and share with him your concerns about that portion of the bill before we take any other action. I think that's fair to him, it's fair to the board, and it's fair to all parties.
So I would suggest that, just to be clear for the record, that be the motion, if you're so inclined.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that our executive director, Mr. Gilbert, take our opinions that came out of this meeting today back to the governor with regard to AB 86. And then return with us with the final discussion and recommendations.
This is Dr. Ford. I second.
Okay, that motion's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
SB 137.
Yes, turning to SB 137, which is a little bit different of a bill. This currently is in the Senate and is in the Senate Commerce, Labor, and Energy Committee. I appeared before that committee on February 18th and advised that the exchange had taken no position on the bill, and I was appearing as a neutral party. However, I did want to bring the committee's attention to two potential issues which might arise given the text and language of the bill. My remarks were directed specifically to the third section of the bill, which would amend NRS 695I and prohibit the exchange from offering qualified health plans on the exchange, which included embedded dental plans. That raised two questions for me. The first problem that I brought to the attention of the committee was that the proposed prohibition raised a concern because, as noted in the bill itself, federal law defines pediatric dental benefits as an essential benefit for health plan purposes under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And in the event that no dental carrier were to offer standalone or bundled coverage in a county or service area, the language of SB 137 would not permit the exchange to offer a qualified health plan to the consumers in that county or service area, which is a significant problem, I believe. So as an unintended consequence, SB 137 as written could impair the exchange's ability to offer every consumer in Nevada access to a qualified health plan. And that risk would be greatest in the rural areas where population may or may not make the offering of a standalone or bundled dental plan either financially viable or attractive. The second issue that I raised was that there is the potential that the language of Section 3 could be read in conflict with federal law, specifically 45 CFR Section 155.1065. And that statute specifically requires the exchange to consider the collective capacity of standalone dental plans to ensure sufficient access to pediatric dental coverage. So if there was a determination of insufficient capacity by the exchange at any time, we would be required to permit embedded dental coverage to meet our obligations under federal law. And that's what I shared with the members of the committee. That bill remains in committee. No vote has been taken so far as I know.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. The amendment, does it address any of your concerns? The proposed amendment to SB 137?
The proposed amendment provides that it would only apply to plans that are effective beginning January 1st, 2016, and not to plans that are sold on or after January 1st, 2016. So no, it does not address either of my concerns.
Dr. Jameson.
I just can't understand why this was even proposed. Can you enlighten me as to what the reason was that this came about? You know, usually there's some incident. It could even be just a friend of someone in the legislature and the governor. But why do you think this even came up?
For the record, Bruce Gilbert, in speaking with proponents of the bill, they indicated that their concern is if you have embedded dental benefits, that there's a requirement that the deductible for dental services, of course, tracks the deductible in your medical plan, and that it might create an issue with respect to people seeking out dental services, pediatric dental services. Of course, the law requires, the federal law requires that preventative services be provided free. So you're only talking about a subset of services that they would be able to argue would be affected by this. We've not seen this as an issue in our market to this point in time, and I don't know that it ever will be. However, I have an issue with constraints on what the board may offer.
Dr. Jameson.
Florence Jameson, I would just concur with your beautiful testimony you gave. All those points, I do not see how we possibly can support it. That's my opinion.
Any other comments? I think my only comment on this was that when we first started the exchange, the board took a pretty strong position to let the market do what it would and how it put these plans together as long as they were compliant. And so if this deviates from that, I think that would go against the board policy.
Bruce Gilbert for the record. So is it the sense of the board that the board opposes this bill so long as section 3 is in there?
That the board would oppose, thank you, SB 137. Did I get that one right? I stood there.
Is there a second?
Is Dr. Ford, I second.
For purposes of discussion, is there anything in the SB 137 that you think is needed?
For the record, Bruce Gilbert, I've actually reached out and spoken with the proponents in an attempt to try to find a way to balance their interest and ours, and I don't see an opportunity to do it.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we take the vote? And just for clarification, Mr. Belcourt, with the members present, we have 4. It takes 3 or 4 for an action.
Madam Chair, Dennis Belcourt, Deputy Attorney General, a majority of members present, so 3 is required.
This is Marie. This is Marie Kerr. This isn't even scheduled for a vote, is it, at this point?
Bruce Gilbert, for the record, it is not. It remains in committee at this time.
So how would we oppose it if it's not going to vote and if it's just in committee?
Bruce Gilbert, again, for the record, there will be additional legislative hearings before it moves into a voting phase, and there will be the opportunity to appear and testify either as a proponent or opponent of the bill.
Could you testify merely to inform them of perhaps unintended consequences of their actions?
Again, Bruce Gilbert, for the record, I've actually done that, and that's why I appeared as a neutral witness initially.
And so, Ms. Kerr, this goes back to my earlier comment of we can take a position or not, but it would, whatever position, whatever direction we give, I would just advise Mr. Gilbert on how we would like him to proceed in future hearings. So any other questions before we call the vote? All right, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you. With respect to what remains on the legislative update, it's a bill draft request. It's BDR 1066, filed by Assemblyman Jones. It is captioned as repealing the provisions creating and providing for the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange. The text is not yet available. When it is, I will be happy to share it with the board. It was filed, I think the BDR request was filed in early February, but I don't have any language specifically to share with you at this time.
Do you recall from the calendar the last date that a bill can be introduced? Non-fiscal. With this, I don't know if this be fiscal bill or not.
Bruce Gilbert, for the record, I do not know that immediately. Mr. Haycock, do you happen to have an answer for that?
No, I'm sorry, I don't, but I can get that information quickly.
Thank you.
Dr. Jameson.
On BDR 1066, repealing provisions creating and providing the Silver State Health Exchange. As we sit here today celebrating the number of people now that have access to health care from our expanded Medicaid, as well as the qualified health plans, I would strongly oppose this bill.
I think it would be most appropriate for us to react to it when we see the language. There's nothing to testify on until the bill's been introduced, but clearly
let me just say opposed to what this states.
If I may, Bruce Gilbert, for the record, you're right, Dr. Jameson. We're here celebrating having a good open enrollment. And it's important, I think, to place this bill this bill draft request in context, which I will try to do right now. There are people who have deep philosophical concerns about the Affordable Care Act, and they're entitled to that. There are people who think it's the greatest thing ever, and they're entitled to believe that as well. Our job as a board and as staff that service you, is to implement the determination of the state of Nevada, the governor's office and the legislature, that we have an exchange, and not only that, but the exchange operate appropriately. And there will be people who think we do a great job, and there'll be people who don't like what we do, notwithstanding our results. And I think that this is indicative, this particular BDR is indicative of that. It's a philosophical battle. And so I don't think if we had signed up 250,000 people, it would have made any difference with respect to the filing of this BDR. So I think if we can get others to understand, our responsibility is to take what has been the will of the legislature and the governor and make it work appropriately and make it work right, be able to sign people up. And if they want to argue about the philosophical side, they're welcome to do so. I think that if we look at it in that manner, it'll be interesting to see the language when it comes out, but ultimately, we're doing what we're supposed to do.
This is Marie Kerr. Dr. Jameson, I actually agree with your sentiments. If there is a opportunity or need to express, we haven't seen the bill draft, so we don't know what's in it. But if there is an opportunity or a need to express that, I would recommend that we do so. Again, there's 72,000 people out there, plus whoever was added as a result of the Affordable Care Act to the Medicaid expansion, which I think adds up to almost a tenth of the states or more than a tenth of the state's population. That's an awful lot of people to be leaving out in the cold. So we should express our sentiments.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 7, which is update on the 1095A issuance and consumer assistance process.
This is Laura Rich, and I'll be giving that portion of the report. So I'm here.
Would you be able to speak up?
Can you hear me? Is that better?
You get very close to the microphone, it works.
Is this better?
Very good, thank you.
All right. So I'll be providing an update on the 1095A issuance and consumer assistance. To just provide a little bit of a background, as a state-based marketplace, the exchange is required by law to issue 1095A forms to Nevadans who enrolled in a QHP during 2014. These forms were required to be postmarked no later than January 31st, 2015. And the exchange's vendor, Xerox, was required by contract to perform these functions on behalf of the exchange. So to give you a little bit of an update as to what the schedule was, they were able to perform those functions, and the initial forms were mailed out to plan year 2014 members on January 30th. So all of the 1095A forms were mailed out on January 30th to about 29,000, almost 30,000 households. The first corrected the first corrected 1095A forms were mailed out on March 5th to 209 households. So 209 went out. And a second round of those are due to go out sometime around March 17th. The number of those that are going to go out is yet to be determined. It's all dependent on reconciliation efforts and the number of BOSS corrections that occur between the last round to this round. So how are we providing consumers with 1095 assistance right now? We have a consumer assistance center at the Xerox call center. They're providing, they're actually receiving 50 calls a day on 1095 questions and situations. Xerox was planning to shut down their call center on March 31st, 2015, but due to the initial filing tax season not ending until April 15th, the exchange has requested that Xerox call center remain open and staffed to assist Nevadans during the final 2 weeks. However, Xerox is yet to confirm that they will honor the exchange's request. So in the meantime, we have a Exchange Consumer Assistance Center, which is set to go live on April 1st. As part of the training that is involved for those navigators who are staffing the Consumer Assistance Center, we are including a 1095A training section for those. Additionally, Xerox has verbally informed the exchange that if their call center does shut down on March 31st, 2015, Xerox will designate analysts to assist the exchange in researching and providing assistance for these 1095A forms. To date, though, the exchange has not received a plan on how that is going to be performed, and we are still awaiting that from Xerox. So at this time, the two call centers, the Xerox call center and the Exchange Consumer Assistance Center, as well as the Exchange staff, are the only dedicated human resources assigned to assisting consumers with their 1095A forms. Additionally, we do have NevadaHealthLink.com, the Exchange website, which I believe that Mr. Klimas went over on his portion of the report, where he specifically said that we do have 2014 tax information that exists on the homepage and navigates people to a webpage full of resources and information that includes, what to expect, Nevadans who wish to file an exemption, and what happens to Nevadans who didn't enroll into Nevada Health Link for 2014 plans, and if you have any questions about your 2014 federal income tax filings. So we have many different avenues for consumers to receive assistance from the exchange, from Xerox, and on our website as well. The webpage also directs people to free help in their area through the VITA program and or by calling the 1-800 number that is provided. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Florence Jameson, when Xerox said they would help designate some help, although that doesn't necessarily refer to them staying open past the 31st, did that mean they're going to send some of their qualified people to our call center? I didn't understand what that meant when they said they would designate some help.
So this is Laura Rich for the record. We don't have a plan in place from Xerox. What we assume will be available to us is a research analyst who either the exchange staff or the navigators at the Consumer Assistance Center will be able to reach out to and ask for information, ask for data, and do some of that research, since we will not have any insight into the BOSS operating system.
Yes.
And although it's just been an average of 50 calls a day, as we saw with the last week of open enrollment, I imagine the last 2 weeks of getting people getting ready to file their taxes, and it's going to probably be much more than 50 a day. How do you think if they do completely close out at the 31st and there's 2 more weeks in our call center, do you anticipate if it goes up to even 100 calls a day and that we can handle the volume, and do we have the expertise if we don't get a designated research person?
This is Bruce Gilbert for the record.
Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, we have a 10-seat call center, so that even if we were to get double or even triple the amount that are coming in now, with 10 people, we can handle that. We can handle that call volume. So I think because we're building out to 10, we'll be okay through this transition. With respect to not having access to an analyst, that would be an issue. And it would be an issue because we have no independent way of accessing the information that is currently in the BOSS system to assist people in resolving their concerns. There are some other actions that we will be taking that I think Damon is going to talk about in his section, which is section 9, which will give you a little more insight about how, because this sort of figures into the overall Xerox closeout, if you will. And so he'll be talking about some things that will impact this as well. But not worried about the phone calls. Am I worried about our vendor partner being able to give us the information timely that we need? I am.
Any other questions?
On page 2, it says that Xerox informed us on March 4th that they mailed something out on March 5th. They mailed out corrected 1095A forms. Do we have confirmation from them? Because that seems to have occurred the day after their report was given to us.
This is Damon Haycock for the record, and yes, we did get confirmation. That report was written with the assumption that it would be out and we would correct it if it didn't occur, but we received confirmation that morning that the corrections went out on the 5th.
Any other questions? I have two. One is, will you be able to know in these second and final cycles of corrected forms that go out, if any of them were corrections of prior corrections that went out? So that what I'm after is whether or not the consumer, will we know if they got multiple corrections?
This is Damon Haycock for the record. That's a very good question, Ms. Johnstone, and we have asked for and we firmly expect to receive that information. However, that'll be information provided by Xerox, and therefore we either believe or disbelieve the numbers that they provide.
Okay. My second question is the final on this schedule estimated in April. Do we have a commitment from Xerox to run that cycle?
This is Damon Haycock. Yes, we do have a commitment, but the final day is predicated based on the data freeze that must occur in their system, which then generates the process for the 1095A forms to be generated and then sent to the printer for mailing. And that final data freeze has not been finalized, but we anticipate it, of course, prior to April 15th.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to number 8, item 8, which is Navigator RFA update.
So this is Damon Haycock for the record. Today I'll be giving this RFA update. Traditionally, you heard it from our finance officer, Carrie Eaton, who's enjoying the wonderful sun in Mexico right now. So I will be giving you the update today. Of course, this is an update on that 2015 Navigator request for application process. As you've been reported to previously, we published that RFA on Friday, January 23rd, and it was published on the Exchange website, noticed on all of the Exchange listservs, and notification was sent to all previous entities who applied. And so we wanted to ensure that the information got out appropriately and effectively to any interested parties. There were, of course, the 2 mandatory orientations held on February 2nd and February 4th. And in total, 20 entities attended those sessions. There was a deadline for submitted questions, and I believe we'd already gone over that in the past on what the process was for the RFA. It shouldn't be new to the board. What I can definitely say is that there were 11 entities that submitted applications by the February 25th deadline. And there's a table on page 2 that goes over the breakdown of those submissions. And I want to make this abundantly clear that these are what these entities have submitted. These are not what the Exchange has approved, nor are recommending for approval, but just to give a snapshot and an illustration of what was received so the board can have an idea of what we plan to bring back at the next board meeting. There, of course, is an announcement in there about the difference between those navigators that are proposed for the northern Nevada section as well as the southern Nevada. And basically, in summary, what this table solidifies is that there are between 52 and 84 navigators per month. And why there's a 32 navigator swing is entities recognize that they may not be able to have enough work for a full-time navigator in between open enrollment periods, and so they recommended ramping down between those periods and then ramping back up during open enrollment. The north-south representation fluctuates between 9 to 11% of the navigators submitted for the north and 89 to 91% in the south. And the total budgets that were all requested totaled just over $2.2 million, almost $2.3 million. And just to give a comparison as to the approved budget for this year at $2.2 million, this is just under $75,000 greater than the entire Exchange Navigator budget. So what that means to everybody here is that there will definitely be some negotiations to bring us back in line with the approved budget as well as the needs and requirements of the Exchange. One thing to note is that these submissions, and of course the analysis above, does not include the Consumer Assistance Center you've heard a couple times today that we are ramping up on April 1st here in Carson City. And so those 5 to 10, as Bruce mentioned, navigators are not part of this process. So that is in addition to what you see here today. Another important part of this RFA process is, of course, the announced special enrollment period that Tyler went over about, from March 15th through April 30th. And CMS did, of course, announce that on the 20th. I won't regurgitate that here at this meeting, but what's very important is that we saw an opportunity here at the exchange to continue to utilize the navigators that have assisted us through this initial open enrollment and that first special enrollment that went through almost the end of February, and to buy us a little bit of time to ensure that we provide the most appropriate and thorough analysis and can provide recommendations to the board. We elected to extend the same 2 navigator entities that were working for us through this month, through the month of April, to ensure that the same folks that are used to dealing with the same population can assist Nevadans enrolled during the special enrollment period. And we find this to be very critical. It also gives us a smooth transition into the utilization of new navigators. If we were to follow the original plan and have new navigator entities on April 1st, and for whatever reason the current navigator entities were not selected, we would have brand new folks potentially who have never worked with Nevadans in this process, and we were concerned with such a specific special enrollment period clause, all the attestations and the fines and those things, that it was in the best interest of the exchange and Nevadans to go to the people that they're used to going to now, who are already currently trained, certified, and approved to help. And so we extended those through the month of April, and we plan on continuing our analysis and providing the board at next month's board meeting with recommendations for those navigator entity awards. And so this new grant period then we are proposing will be from May 1st instead of April 1st, and it will continue through the end of January in 2016. This delayed start, of course, aligns the current awardees with the oncoming awardees and provides that opportunity for learning and training. With that, that's basically the totality of this report. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Haycock. Any questions regarding the Navigator RFA? Dr. Jameson?
We were talking about when we had the increased navigators joining in on the new consumer assistant call center, when we were discussing at the prior meetings, that we thought we were going to end up with sort of a balanced budget on that. At least that was my maybe erroneous assumption. Or what will another additional 5 to 10 new navigators cost us?
So, very good question, Dr. Jameson. Damon Haycock for the record. It is anticipated that we will utilize the entire, or close to the entire, approved $2.2 million navigator budget for this year, not only to supply the navigators that will meet this part of the program, but also those 5 to 10 navigators that will staff the Consumer Assistance Center. And so we may come back to the board next month with recommendations that instead of the 52 to 84 navigators per month, that we may present a different option or opportunity to reduce that by the 5 to 10 to make up for the Consumer Assistance Center. But we haven't crunched those numbers as of yet, but we promise to have those to you in time for that review.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Jameson?
Just one comment. I was very excited about the plan of adding the new 5 to 10, so hopefully that will work out.
Good. We'll move on to the next item, which is number 9, status of the Xerox closeout.
All right, Damon Haycock for the record. The purpose of this report, of course, is to provide the board and the public on updates to that technical closeout. Certain things have had some momentum and some movement on them. Certain things have not. The BOSS decommissioning is still on schedule. There's no new news to report on it. That the actual unplugging, or as it has been affectionately termed, the decoupling from Medicaid and the exchange, is on target to occur at 8 a.m. on April 1st. Those disconnections of those transmissions are are on par, and we will have a series of meetings to ensure that everyone knows exactly what they're doing at the time that they're doing it for that decommissioning. So with that, we feel very confident that that process will go flawlessly. As far as the data retention is concerned, we had multiple meetings with EATS, and it was anticipated at the last board meeting that they would be able to have the capacity and capability and funding to meet the long-term data retention needs of the exchange. I regret to inform the board that EATS is no longer in that position. However, we did not put all of our eggs in one basket and had already planned to have backup processes in place in case EATS could not perform this critical function. And once we found out that EATS could not, we activated those options. That option is to currently utilize a third-party vendor to host the data. Our current vendor, Natoma, is still developing the applications for the exchange to be able to dig into the data that we eventually receive from Xerox to perform 1095A form corrections, as well as to answer any questions that meet the requirement for data retention for Nevadan consumers or for our federal partners at CMS and the IRS, as well as any litigation requests. And so we have a plan that we have activated that we believe will be successful. The request for proposal hit on last Friday, and we are anxiously awaiting questions and the opportunity to contract with a Nevada company, potentially, to hold the data for us for the entire 10-year period. However, through state contracting, we anticipate an initial 1 to 2 year, and then we can reevaluate from there. That's basically the bulk of the data retention update. As far as the call center closeout, I think Laura mentioned to everyone here that Xerox had still planned to exit on really at the end of this month, and to this date we do not have a fully fledged detailed plan to any of the exchanges liking that shows anything contrary to that. We anticipate that Xerox will come back to us with an official plan to remain through April 15th as what we have requested, but that will not come free, and it will come at a cost. And if history is our judge for the last few months of their operational requests, it'll be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we are anticipating that call center may end up closing, and the fact that we are in the middle of March, we are moving forward all steam ahead to bring up our Consumer Assistance Center on time on April 1st. Again, and I think to address what Dr. Jameson said, how are we going to deal with the supposed resources that Xerox will provide? It is our anticipation that Xerox will provide us a contact or set of contacts that we'll be able to reach out to by phone or by email. And what we are requiring here from the team is that Xerox provides some form of guaranteed time frame, or at least document that they will guarantee a turnaround time. And whether that be 24 hours or 72 hours or 1 week, that hasn't been decided. But the last thing that we want to do is to leave it in their hands to determine how best to serve Nevadans. And so we are rigorously working with Xerox to nail down what resources will be available so that our navigators in our Consumer Assistance Center can be successful in assisting Nevadans with their 1095A forms, as well as any other 2014 issues, until we receive that transmitted data and can activate and utilize it through our data retention and data management process. Last but not least, and it's kind of the big elephant in the room, is case resolution. And as Bruce mentioned earlier, I can give some more insight to it. I wish I could tell you that we are much further ahead than we have ever been, but that is not necessarily the case. The team was assembled in January to review what the process was, and we moved forward with a more project management specific industry type of approach, as well as bringing in our friends at PCG to assist in this process. Throughout this process, though, we've seen some numbers grow and increase and then decrease, and some discrepancies and different definitions on the semantics of what a case is, what an issue is, what is a 1095A correction, and without trying to bore the board or the public here, I think the best way to term it is it's just a mess. And so we have gotten together with the insurance carriers, and we have proposed some options that we hope will assist them in finalizing the reconciliations for their consumers. Because in the end, those insurance carriers are the ones who wrote contracts with those consumers for their insurance products. And when Xerox eventually leaves, those insurance carriers and the exchange are going to own what's left of this reconciliation effort for however many years that we have to deal with it. And I don't mean to paint a gloomy picture here, but I want to make it very, very apparent and to set expectations that we here, at least the team at the exchange, has no inclination that the reconciliation effort will be 100% complete by the time Xerox departs. And there will still be some stuff that we have to clean up, both at the exchanges level and the carriers level. And we have partnered with them, and it is our desire to make them as whole as possible as we take care of every Nevadan that had an issue in 2014 with their health plan. And so we have proposed a time frame. That time frame has not been necessarily approved by every carrier. And so we are working with each carrier individually to determine what is the best process for them to be successful so we can put 2014 behind us, of course, placing the Nevada consumer at our highest priority. So with that, and I know that's a lot of verbiage here today on this report, I am here to answer questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hickok? I don't know what to say to all that. Hearing none. Mr. Gilbert, do you have any comments?
I do have a couple of comments. I will tell you that despite the tenor of what you heard, I'm actually pretty satisfied with the way that things are going. I live in ambiguity under the best of circumstances. And when it comes to dealing with this massive data and the correction files that have gone back and forth, and the correction files that were supposedly going back and forth but never actually sent, I've been around a long time. It's a serious mess. I mean, it's just bad. It's just bad. And it has fallen upon us to try and fix it. What we've ended up doing is coming up with both a timeline and a process, which I think puts us further ahead than we have been. We have brought that timeline to the attention of our carrier partners and said, this is the length of time we're talking about doing things, and these are the processes that we would like to use to get you to the end of this. And every carrier, as you might expect, has its own set of interests and has its own way of looking at how best to resolve this. And so we're treating them individually, as I think we should. And that goes for dental carriers as well as medical carriers. The process will be different for some than others. But in any case, it's hard to say that we have a great global resolution, because I don't know that we do. And if I sat here and told you that we did, I'd be doing you a disservice. It's as bad a mess as I've ever seen. And it's going to take as much time and effort as we can possibly put into it to fix it. Mr. Hickok is right. It's never going to be 100% right. But we're going to fix as much of it as we can within time constraints that we have.
This is Leslie Johnstone. What level of complaint are we getting from the consumers at this point, or how are the consumers being forced to deal with the uncertainty?
This is Bruce Gilbert for the record. Actually, we're doing very well with the consumers. We don't have a tremendous number of consumer complaints, and those that we do are handled here in Henderson, where we have staff that are specifically tasked with assisting them. I hear from them not quite daily, but close to it. And we walk problems individually through Xerox and or the carrier to conclusion. I don't think that we're overwhelmed at this point. I think that because many of the consumer issues, many of the obvious consumer issues were dealt with early, that we don't have that big a backlog. But it still, we have so many inconsistencies in terms of the data that it's very difficult for us to plow through it. And it changes week to week, guys. I mean, it just does. Oh, we decided, here's a list of people you should have terminated 6 months ago. I mean, it's unworkable. And so what we're trying to do, and people like to talk about herding cats, this is 1,000 times worse. We're just trying to get our arms around things and put in a timeline and a process that will get us to the end of the 2014 troubles.
So I think I asked this once before. If one statement is there's always going to be some problem issues and then a plan to get us to the end. So is there a definition of when we're done with the reconciliation?
Bruce Gilbert, for the record. We're done with the reconciliation when we take the information from Xerox and we now own it, and we have consistent information with respect to our system, which it will be at that point in time, and the information that the insurance carriers have. That's when it'll be done.
Is there any kind of discussion going on with the carriers about at some point in time we're going to stop making retroactive adjustments past X number of months, or something to protect the carriers as much as the consumer from retroactive adjustments?
This is Bruce Gilbert again, and the answer to that is yes. I think we've probably reached the point in time where everybody's throwing up their hands, to be honest with you, and just said, okay, enough is enough. How many hours can I put into this? How much manpower can I put into this? How many dollars can I possibly invest in what's essentially a rabbit hole? And I do know that there are a number of carriers who said, you know what, enough. So let's talk about how we resolve our particular issues on a more global basis. And so those are ongoing discussions. And it may very well be that that's the end product where everybody just says, okay, you know, we fix as much of it as we can, and the economic cost doesn't justify any additional effort. Here's what we think you owe us in premium, or here's what we think we owe you, or however it may end up. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're getting to.
Is there a target date about when we might decide to make those kinds of decisions collectively?
Damon, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, Damon Haycock for the record. We have proposed a process specifically for that reason, that we know we need a target end date. And our initial proposal here at the exchange put out a 90-day time frame. That 90-day time frame, had we moved immediately, would have already began, but you can't hear us?
No.
Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
No, lean closer, do something.
He's like, how about now? Is this any better?
No.
Wow. Okay. Try, it's all the way up at this point. I don't know if you can hear us. Okay.
Yeah, much better.
I'll try not to repeat too much. We have proposed a process to the carriers that centered around a 90-day time frame. That 90-day time frame begins when that carrier decides that they want to, one, end this process in 90 days, and two, that they have declared they're ready to go. And more so that we are supporting their decision than they are following our approved official policy. Because as we recognize, we have no legal authority over our insurance carriers. Our desire is just to help them as much as we can reconcile these issues. And so if we were to begin today, you would be looking at the middle of June. There are some carriers that have responded that they're very interested in this process. There are others that are interested but want some details changed. And a couple haven't responded really at all. And so, as Mr. Gilbert said, we're treating them all differently, but we're not halting any reconciliation efforts whatsoever. And one thing I do want to add to what Mr. Gilbert said, although we will eventually come to a time in the next so many months where we will declare collectively that we are done with 2014 reconciliations, we still have to, by law, allow individuals to reconcile their previous year's taxes. And the IRS has required that we be able to perform those 1095A corrections They haven't confirmed how many years yet, but the discussions are centered so far around 3 and 4 year time frame. Do we expect to have 30,000 people coming back to us every year saying they want to change their 1095A forms? No. But if someone does decide to go back and want to review or revise their taxes, we have to, by law, be able to go into a system, look up their data, and determine if the decision was made appropriately, and if it wasn't, issue out corrected 1095A forms. So there's the bulk of the reconciliation that we feel can be done in the next 90 days or some quick time thereafter, and then there is those one-offs that may occur for years to come.
So I have one more question, and this may not be possible to answer, but has every account been reviewed at some level so that there's an initial finding about what needs to be done?
Damon Haycock, for the record, I'm going to assume, and please correct me, Ms. Johnstone, if you mean by every account that has been reported of a problem versus every account that exists in the system. If it's every account that exists in the system, it is my understanding today that Xerox has not done a full accounting of. Those that have issues, we get reports that they have X amount of discrepancies that they need to solve. And as Mr. Gilbert said, those numbers will fluctuate. And one of the latest reports we had were in the tens of thousands, and then today on a call they said that should be reduced, but they don't have a final number, but they know that it's reduced. And so again, this ambiguity, this vague response prevents me from giving you a clear answer. But we can request numbers if you want to believe them.
I think I'll just choose to take that as a no.
This is Bruce Gilbert for the record. I think that's wise. As Damon has pointed out, things fluctuate daily, weekly, and something that was supposedly fixed 2 months ago, all of a sudden there's a new correction file for. So there's never any certainty. And it's that inability to have stability in your data and consistency in your data that really goes to the heart of what we're struggling with here.
All right. Is there anything the board can do to help with the process?
Bruce Gilbert, for the record, I honestly believe we are doing everything that is possible to bring this to resolution by moving away from saying to carriers who frankly had enough, we're going to go through this line by line, but instead being more facilitative, if you will, and saying, look, we know there's a problem here. You know there's a problem. How best do we work through this? How do we make sure that the consumers come out okay? How do we make sure that you come out okay? And I think in the course of those discussions, which were different than any discussions which we had, I think that we've come up with a strategy that we've spoken with the Division of Insurance about and others. And I think that give credit to Damon. Damon said there is no good way to do this, and there's not. But this is the best of all the bad ways that we could figure out.
Dr. Jameson.
I understand the fix we're in, but just because many of us like to look at numbers, and I know that all the buckets and the different numbers we had in every bucket was our best we could do to sort of just give us a general idea of where we stood. At some point, we'll see, perhaps in 3 months or 6 months, not, of course, expecting this has anything to do with someone who could open up a case 2 or 3 years later, but for at least now have some resolution. Will we see some numbers again back to the board?
Bruce Gilbert, for the record. Dr. Jameson, what you're asking for is eminently reasonable. And if I felt that I could give you numbers that I and you could both depend on, I'd give them to you every day. The quandary that I find myself in, and the reason that I have resisted it thus far is one of the things that I think that is very important is that staff and board and public be transparent. And if I can't give you a number that I can justify and hold up and say, I'm giving you this, trust me, it's right, it makes it very difficult for me to trot numbers out. What I think that we can do is that ultimately in probably next month, we can give you some understanding of the number of carriers who have said, yo, I've had enough and here's the direction I want you to go in, and other carriers who are still considering or what have you. So you have a more global understanding, but in terms of the actual number of discrepancies that require review or otherwise. I'm kind of hard. It's hard for me to do that, to be frank.
And I appreciate that it's really hard. However, as a trustee, it is just so imperative. Our number one is our fiduciary responsibilities, and it's very hard for us to understand the gravity, how big this problem is, and at least be able to at some point have some understanding of how much the problem is being successfully addressed. I would like to be able to tell people the magnitude of it and what kind of progress we're making in some way, small or large. In which direction?
Yeah, Bruce Gilbert for the record, and that is a very fair request. And I will go back and meet with my staff and see if there's not a way to give you what you've asked for.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic? Thank you, Mr. Haycock. The next item is discussion and possible action regarding dates, times, and agenda items for future meetings. Board members have any special topics they want to ask to be brought forward? I would just ask that if the bill actually is introduced regarding the BDR,
It's 1066.
If you advise us of that, and then we'll decide whether or not action's needed before the next board meeting, or if the board needs to talk about it before the next monthly board meeting. Anything else? Marie?
No, thank you.
All right. Is there any public comment in Carson City?
Very briefly, for the record, Tracy Woods. I'm here today on behalf of the Nevada Association of Health Plans, really to echo what Mr. Gilbert said about SB 137. He very eloquently stated what we feel and believe about Section 3 of 137. So we too oppose that section. We want consumers to continue to have an array of products, including an embedded QHP plan. So we're in agreement. I just wanted to put that on the record today. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comment in Carson? Public comment?
No.
Thank you. Any public comment in Henderson? All right. Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Public comments. I like these people who wanted to tell us their histories. One guy wanted to take off his shirt and show me his scarf.